Today we are covering designing Microsoft Azure infrastructure solutions. To find the complete list of questions and answers, please go to the playlist link provided in the description. If you like this content, do like, share and subscribe to this channel. Case study. This is a case study. Case studies are not timed separately. You can use as much exam time as you would like to complete each case. However, there may be additional case studies and sections on this exam. You must manage your time to ensure that you are able to complete all questions including on this exam in the time provided. To answer the questions included in a case study, you will need to reference information that is provided in the case study. Case studies might contain exhibits and other resources that provide more information about the scenario that is described in the case study. Each question is independent of the other question in this case study. At the end of this case study, a review screen will appear, and this screen allows you to review your answers and to make changes before you move to the next section of the exam. After you begin a new section, you cannot return to this section. To start case study, to display the first question in the case study, click the Next button. Use the buttons in the left pane to explore the content of the case study before you answer the questions. Clicking these buttons display information such as business requirements, existing environment, and problem statements. If the case study has an All Information tab, note that the information displayed is identical to the information displayed on the subsequent tabs. When you are ready to answer a question, click the Question button to return to the question. These are the instructions for the real exam. Existing environment. Azure environment. Litware has 10 Azure subscriptions that are linked to the litware.com tenant and 5 Azure subscriptions that are linked to the dev.litware.com tenant. All the subscriptions are in an Enterprise Agreement EA. The litware.com tenant contains a custom Azure role-based access control Azure RBAC role named Role 1 that grants the data access read permission to the blobs and files in the Azure storage. On-premises environment. The on-premises network of Litware contains the resources shown in the following table. This is the table. Network environment. Litware has express route connectivity to Azure. Planned changes and requirements. Litware plans to implement the following changes. First, migrate DB1 and DB2 to Azure. Second, migrate App1 to Azure Virtual Machines. Third, migrate the external storage used by App1 to Azure Storage. Fourth, deploy the Azure Virtual Machines that will host App1 to Azure dedicated hosts. Authentication and authorization requirements. Litware identifies the following authentication and authorization requirements. Only users that manage the production environment by using the Azure portal must connect from a hybrid Azure AD joined device and authenticate by using Azure Multi-Factor Authentication (MFA). The network contributor built-in RBAC role must be used to grant permissions to the network administrators for all the virtual networks in all the Azure subscriptions. To access the resources in Azure, App1 must use the managed identity of the virtual machines that will host the app. RBAC roles must be applied at the highest level possible. Resiliency requirements. Litware identifies the following resiliency requirements. Once migrated to Azure, DB1 and DB2 must meet the following requirements. First, maintain availability if two availability zones in the local Azure region fail. Second, fail over automatically. Third, minimize I/O latency. App 1 must meet the following requirements. First, be hosted in an Azure region that supports availability zones. Second, be hosted on Azure virtual machines that support automatic scaling. Third, maintain availability if two availability zones in the local Azure region fail. Security and compliance requirements. Litware identifies the following security and compliance requirements. First, once App 1 is migrated to Azure, you must ensure that the new data can be returned to the app and the modification of the new existing data is prevented for a period of 3 years. Second, on-premises users and services must be able to access the Azure storage account that will host the data in App 1. Third, access to the public endpoint of the Azure storage account that will host the App 1 data must be prevented. Fourth, all Azure SQL databases in the production environment must have transparent data encryption (TDE) enabled. Fifth, App 1 must not share physical hardware with other workloads. Business requirements. Litware identifies the following business requirements. First, minimize administrative effort. Second, minimize costs. Now the question is, after you migrate App 1 to Azure, you need to enforce the data modification requirements to meet the security and compliance requirements. What should you do? Option A. Create an access policy for the blob service. Option B. Implement Azure resource locks. Option C. Create Azure RBAC assignments. Option D. Modify the access level of the blob service. Correct answer is option A.